Mark Jensen had always found peace on the water. Every Friday afternoon, after a grueling week of meetings and deadlines, he would haul his gear down to the marina, nestled in their quiet suburban community. His pride and joy, a sleek, polished, 24-foot motorboat, rested calmly in its assigned slip, a small oasis of freedom in an otherwise tightly controlled neighborhood. This Friday was no different. The sun hung low, casting golden ribbons across the water. The gentle lapping of waves and the salty breeze were Mark's favorite kind of therapy. As he locked the dock gate behind him, he noticed a cluster of neighbors chatting near the marina office. Their hushed voices carried an unusual tension. Mark shrugged off the feeling and focused on prepping his boat for a weekend cruise with his wife. The promise of open water was irresistible. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Mark brewed his coffee and stepped outside, humming as he made his way down to the marina. His steps slowed, and a cold knot tightened in his stomach the moment he reached the dock. His boat, his beloved Escape, was gone. Where it should have been bobbing gently in the water, there was only empty space, the faint ripple of disturbed water the only sign it had ever been there. A small, crisp white envelope lay taped to the dock's post, fluttering in the morning breeze. Mark's fingers trembled as he peeled the envelope free. Inside, a note was scrawled in sharp, unforgiving handwriting. Your boat has been removed. For violation of HOA rules. Contact the HOA office for details. Mark's mind raced. HOA rules? What violation? No one even mentioned any new regulations about boats. He stormed to the marina office, but it was locked tight. A sign taped to the window read, "Closed for maintenance. Urgent inquiries call 555-0199. His fingers dialed the number with growing frustration, but no one answered. Instead, a voicemail message played, eerily calm. Thank you for contacting the HOA office. We are currently unavailable. Please leave a message. Mark's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. The marina had always been a place of community and calm, but now a chilling silence hung over it like a dark cloud. He paced the dock, eyes scanning for any clue. Neighbors gathered nearby, whispering anxiously. Mrs. Diaz, an elderly woman known for her sharp tongue, approached cautiously. You didn't hear? Karen's been cracking down hard lately, she said, glancing around as if afraid Karen might appear out of nowhere. Says the boat's been illegally docked, and she's taken it herself. Mark blinked, disbelieving. Karen? The HOA president, infamous for her over-the-top enforcement and endless rules? The same woman who had once fined a neighbor for planting daisies without permission? His heart hammered. This wasn't just a petty disagreement anymore. It was personal. But why his boat? And what did illegally docked even mean? No formal warning, no hearing, no notice beyond that cryptic note taped to the dock. Mark's mind flashed back to Karen's recent HOA meetings, the veiled threats, the tightened rules, the way she wielded power like a weapon. He realized he had ignored the warnings, thinking it was all bureaucratic nonsense. Now, that nonsense had turned into a nightmare. Determined, Mark pulled out his phone and started filming the empty dock, the note, and the worried faces of his neighbors. If Karen wanted a fight, he would give her one, but he needed proof. As he recorded, a shadow moved near the marina office window. Mark's breath caught. Was Karen watching? Or someone else, maybe one of her loyal enforcers? The marina's peaceful. Morning had shattered. Mark's quiet weekend was gone, replaced by a growing storm that promised to sweep through the community, one that he was ready to face, no matter the cost. The morning sun climbed higher, but Mark felt the weight of the day pressing down like a storm cloud. His boat, his freedom, had vanished overnight, stolen right from under his nose. The word illegally from Karen's note kept echoing in his mind. Illegally? How could that be? Determined to understand the full extent of what he was facing, Mark made his way to the community clubhouse. The HOA board was supposed to meet today, and he had heard rumors Karen planned to unveil a new set of regulations, ones that could change everything about life in their neighborhood. As he entered the room, a buzz of whispered conversations stopped abruptly. All eyes, wary and tense, turned toward him. A few neighbors nodded in solidarity, but most looked down, afraid of the repercussions from Karen and her small army of enforcers. At the front, Karen stood with her usual stern expression, clipboard in hand, radiating control. She didn't bother with pleasantries as she began reading aloud the new HOA policy amendments. No longer would boats be permitted at the marina without prior detailed inspections and approval, she announced. The inspections, of course, came with fees and paperwork. She justified it as ensuring safety and community standards. But the truth was clear to everyone in the room. It was a power grab disguised as protocol. Mark's stomach twisted as he realized the new rule was written with him in mind. No notice had been sent, no vote taken. Karen had pushed it through quietly, behind closed doors, then sprung it on the community like a trap. After the meeting, Mark cornered Karen. His voice was calm but firm. "Karen, I've been docking my boat here for years without a single complaint. Where is this illegal violation? And why didn't anyone notify me?" Karen's eyes flashed cold. "Rules are rules, Mark. You should have kept up. I gave plenty of warnings." Her tone was sharp, laced with that familiar sense of superiority. "Your boat was a hazard, and it disturbed the peace. If you want it back, you'll have to comply, starting with paying the inspection fees." Mark clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "I want those warnings in writing, and I want my boat back immediately." Karen smirked. "No can do. It's been impounded by the HOA for your non-compliance. I suggest you think twice before defying the board." Word spread quickly that Karen was wielding her new rules like a weapon, taking boats, freezing privileges, and fining anyone who challenged her authority. A creeping fear spread among residents, many who once admired the community's peaceful order now whispered about a growing dictatorship. Mark felt the walls closing in, but he refused to back down. He began canvassing neighbors, collecting their stories of Karen's relentless enforcement. Neighbors fined for minor landscaping, for leaving a trash can out an extra hour, even for kids playing basketball after dark. The list grew disturbingly long. As dusk settled, Mark's phone buzzed with a message from a trusted neighbor. "Karen's been seen near your boat's storage lot. She's acting nervous." A chill ran down Mark's spine. If Karen was scared, maybe she knew she'd gone too far. Or maybe she was preparing for the next move, one he hadn't yet anticipated. Mark resolved to stay vigilant. This wasn't just about a boat anymore. It was a battle for the soul of the neighborhood. And Karen, with all her petty rules and ruthless tactics, was a force he had to stop. He closed his eyes briefly and made a silent promise. He would expose her overreach. But first, he needed evidence, solid proof, and that meant playing Karen's game, watching her moves, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The marina, once a sanctuary for Mark, now felt like a cage watched by unseen eyes. After the confrontation with Karen, Mark knew he was on thin ice. The woman's grip on the HOA was tightening with every passing day, and anyone who dared challenge her risked becoming her next target. Determined to uncover the full extent of her overreach, Mark devised a plan. He spent the next afternoon installing small, discreet cameras around the marina and the surrounding docks. Hidden in the shadows, the devices would record anyone who approached his former boat's slip or the HOA office itself. As night fell, Mark sat in his living room, his laptop open and streaming live footage from the cameras. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow could reveal the truth. He wasn't going to be blindsided again. Hours passed with nothing but the occasional rustle of leaves and distant city sounds. Then, just past midnight, his heart skipped a beat. Movement. On the screen, a figure appeared near the marina office, a tall woman, her silhouette unmistakable. It was Karen. Mark leaned forward as she fumbled with the lock, pulling out a set of keys with an air of practiced familiarity. The door creaked open and she slipped inside. Curiosity turning to alarm, Mark watched as Karen pulled out a folder thick with papers and what looked like a small black USB drive. She paused, then hastily stuffed the items into her bag. Suddenly, the marina's security alarm blared. Karen's eyes widened, and for a split second, Mark saw something unexpected. Fear. She rushed toward the door, but the alarm had already triggered neighbors to wake. Flashlights swept the marina grounds as Karen disappeared into the night. Mark's pulse pounded. What was in those files? Why had she been sneaking around in the dead of night? The next morning, Mark shared the footage with a few trusted neighbors. Their reactions were mixed. Some shocked, others wary. No one had dared confront Karen directly until now. That afternoon, Mark was approached by Jenna, a quiet woman who had long kept to herself. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I've seen things too," Jenna said. "Karen's been threatening people who don't comply, letters, phone calls, even visits at odd hours. I think she's covering something up." Mark nodded slowly. "That explains a lot. We need more than stories, though. We need proof." Jenna hesitated, then handed him a small flash drive. "This might help. It's copies of emails and HOA meeting minutes Karen tried to hide. Some of them have signatures that don't look right." Mark's eyes widened. If Karen was forging documents or hiding records, that was serious, possibly illegal. He plugged the drive into his laptop, scanning the files quickly. There it was. Altered vote counts, manipulated rule changes, and threatening messages to residents who challenged Karen. Mark felt a cold fury rising. Karen wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. She was actively abusing her power to control and intimidate. As dusk turned to night, Mark sat alone by the empty marina dock, the spot where his boat once floated. The gentle splash of water was a haunting reminder of what was lost. But now, armed with evidence and allies, Mark was ready to fight back. And as he looked out across the dark water, he knew one thing for certain. This battle was far from over. Mark's discovery of the hidden emails and altered documents was a breakthrough, but it only pulled him deeper into the tangled web Karen had spun around the community. The truth was more frightening than he'd imagined. Karen's control wasn't just petty rule enforcement. It was an orchestrated campaign to seize power and silence dissent. The next morning, Mark decided it was time to share his findings with the HOA board, excluding Karen, of course. He arranged a discreet meeting with two other board members known for their fairness and decency. In a quiet corner of the community cafe, Mark laid out the evidence. The emails, the forged documents, the videos of Karen's midnight raid on the HOA office. One of the board members, a woman named Lisa, gasped. "This is serious, Mark. If these documents are real, Karen could be facing criminal charges." Mark nodded. "I'm going to take this to the authorities if the board doesn't act." Lisa's eyes flickered with concern. "She's got supporters, though. A lot of people are afraid to speak up because of the fines and threats. Karen's been freezing accounts, seizing property rights. She's using the HOA like her own personal army." Mark felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The stakes were higher than he'd imagined. This was no longer just about a stolen boat. It was a fight for the community's soul. That afternoon, word leaked about the meeting. Karen caught wind and retaliated immediately. An official letter arrived at Mark's door, a demand for payment of back fees and penalties totaling thousands of dollars. Failure to pay would result in liens placed against his property. The message was clear: back down or lose everything. Mark's neighbors started whispering in the streets. Some offered support, others pulled away, too scared of Karen's wrath. The community was fracturing under the pressure. Late one evening, Mark received a phone call from an unknown number. A hushed voice warned him to stop digging or face consequences worse than fines. But Mark's resolve only hardened. He began documenting every interaction with the HOA, recording phone calls and saving messages. He urged neighbors to do the same, hoping to build a case that couldn't be ignored. One night, as Mark sat reviewing his evidence, a shadow appeared outside his window. A sudden tap on the glass startled him. He pulled back the curtains slowly, heart pounding, but saw only a folded note left on the windowsill. It read, "Stop, now or else." Mark's breath caught. Karen's threats were no longer just words, they were becoming dangerous. Yet, even as fear crept in, Mark refused to be intimidated. He knew the fight would only escalate, but so would his determination to see justice done. The next day, Mark met with a local attorney specializing in HOA disputes. The lawyer's eyes widened at the evidence. "This isn't just about rules," she said grimly. "It's about abuse of power and potential criminal misconduct. We're going to make sure Karen answers for this." As Mark left the lawyer's office, he felt a flicker of hope amid the storm. The authorities might be the only ones who could finally rein in Karen's unchecked tyranny, but Karen was watching, waiting for her next move. And Mark knew this battle was far from over. Mark's battle against Karen's iron grip on the HOA was becoming a lonely war. Many neighbors, though sympathetic, were too afraid to openly stand with him. Karen's reach was long, her reputation as a relentless enforcer cemented by years of petty punishments and whispered threats. Then came an unexpected message, a text from an anonymous number. "Meet me at the park tonight. I have info you need. Trust me." Mark hesitated but knew he had no choice. If he wanted to dismantle Karen's web of control, he'd need help from inside. At dusk, Mark arrived at the small community park, shadows stretching long under the fading light. A figure emerged from the trees. It was Daniel, a quiet HOA board member known for staying under the radar. "Thanks for coming," Daniel said, eyes darting nervously. "I don't trust Karen, not anymore. She's been hiding things from the board, manipulating votes, and threatening anyone who asked questions." Mark nodded. "I've got evidence of forged documents and secret meetings, but I need more. Proof that can't be dismissed." Daniel pulled out a small folder, thick with papers marked "Confidential." "These are copies of internal HOA emails, budget reports, and meeting transcripts Karen tried to delete from official records. Look here, she's been funneling HOA funds into a private account." Mark's jaw tightened. Corruption was worse than he thought. "We have to get this to the authorities." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. Karen controls most of the board and she's got allies in local government. If we go public too soon, she'll bury us all." Instead, Daniel proposed a risky plan. Gather more evidence, expose Karen's misdeeds with undeniable proof, then confront her with the full weight of the law. Mark agreed. Together, they began covertly gathering testimonies from residents who had been silenced by Karen's threats. They recorded secret meetings, collected bank statements, and traced the money trail that Karen desperately tried to hide. But Karen wasn't blind to their efforts. Late one evening, Mark's phone buzzed again. A chilling text. "Stop digging, or next time it won't be just warnings." The message left no doubt. Karen's threats were escalating, and Mark had become her primary target. Undeterred, Mark pressed on. One afternoon, Daniel arranged a meeting with the local police liaison, assigned to HOA disputes. He discreetly shared the growing mountain of evidence. The officer's face darkened as he scanned the documents. "This could be the basis for an investigation," the officer said quietly. "We'll need more, but this is a start." Encouraged, Mark and Daniel redoubled their efforts, carefully documenting every encounter, every shady transaction. The tension in the neighborhood grew palpable as whispers of Karen's wrongdoing began to spread. Meanwhile, Karen's paranoia deepened. She ramped up patrols around the marina, installing more cameras and demanding residents report suspicious behavior. Her once firm grip began to show cracks. Late one night, Mark caught sight of Karen sneaking into the marina office again, this time with two other shadowy figures. The mystery deepened. Who were they, and what were they planning? As Mark watched from a distance, heart pounding, he realized this fight was no longer just about his stolen boat. It was about exposing a corrupt empire built on fear and silence. And with Daniel by his side, Mark was ready to bring Karen's empire crashing down. The community was a powder keg. Every conversation hushed, every glance wary. Karen's tightening grip on the HOA had turned neighbors into reluctant spies, fearful of her retaliation. Mark and Daniel knew they needed a decisive move, something that would expose Karen beyond any doubt and force the authorities to act. That night, under the cover of darkness, they finalized their plan. Using the hidden cameras and audio devices, they had secretly planted. Mark and Daniel coordinated with the police liaison. The goal, catch Karen red-handed in an illegal act, something beyond mere paperwork manipulation, something that would make the corruption undeniable. The trap was set. Late into the evening, Mark positioned himself near the marina office, heart pounding in sync with the ticking clock. Daniel was nearby, ready to move at a moment's notice. Minutes dragged by, the quiet so thick it pressed on their chests. Then the door to the marina office creaked open. Karen appeared, clutching a large envelope, her face sharp with determination. Behind her, two unfamiliar men followed. Her enforcers, Mark guessed. They looked out of place in the tranquil community, but carried themselves with a menacing air. Mark and Daniel stayed hidden but ready, cameras rolling, voices recording. Karen barked orders, her tone cold and urgent. She pulled out stacks of cash from the envelope, money that clearly hadn't been accounted for in any HOA records. One of the men nodded and slipped outside, returning moments later with a duffel bag. Karen began stuffing the cash inside, her eyes darting nervously to the windows. Suddenly, headlights swept across the marina, and flashing blue and red lights illuminated the night. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" a voice commanded. Karen's face drained of color. The two men froze, caught off guard. Mark emerged from his hiding spot, phone recording every moment. Karen tried to bluff her way out. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm just handling community funds." But the officers weren't convinced. They had been tipped off by Daniel and Mark, armed with the evidence collected over weeks. The two men were handcuffed and led away, and Karen was placed under investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. News spread fast. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief, hope flickering amid months of fear. But the battle wasn't over. As Karen was escorted from the marina office, she fixed Mark with a venomous glare. "This isn't the end," she hissed. "You don't know what you've started." Mark met her stare evenly. "Maybe, but this time, the law is on our side." The police assured the community they would conduct a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency meeting to begin repairing the damage Karen had done. Neighbors tentatively reached out to each other, the first steps toward healing a fractured neighborhood. Mark, exhausted but determined, looked out, over the marina, the place where it had all begun. His boat was still gone, but his fight had only just started, and one thing was clear: Karen's reign of terror was over. The news of Karen's arrest spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. For the first time in months, residents felt a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim their community from the shadow she'd cast over it. Mark became something of a reluctant hero. Neighbors stopped him on the street, offering thanks and sharing their own stories of intimidation and fines. The marina was slowly returning to its former peaceful state, and the docks began to buzz again with life. But beneath the surface, a tension simmered, one Mark couldn't ignore. Though Karen was behind bars, her supporters hadn't vanished. Rumors swirled of secret meetings and whispered plots to disrupt the investigation and reclaim control. Mark met with Daniel and Lisa at the community center. The trio reviewed the police's progress and discussed plans to rebuild trust in the HOA. "We can't let Karen's influence linger," Lisa said, her voice steady but concerned. "We need transparency, new leadership, and a community united." Daniel nodded. "And we have to protect anyone who steps up. Karen's tactics scared people into silence, but that has to end." Mark agreed. "I'm willing to lead the effort. But we need to be smart. Karen warned me it's not over, and I believe her." Just then, Mark's phone buzzed with a new message. No number, just a cryptic note. "You think you've won? Think again. Check your boat." His stomach tightened. The boat. Mark hadn't forgotten it, still seized by the HOA, caught in the crossfire of Karen's reign. That night, Mark made his way to the marina alone. The moonlight shimmered on the water, the docks eerily quiet. When he reached the slip where his boat was usually moored, his heart sank. The boat was gone. In its place, a small wooden box sat on the dock. Mark opened it carefully and found a single USB drive and a note. "Truth lies below the surface. Find the answers." Confused but intrigued, Mark plugged the USB into his laptop. Back home. What he found stunned him. Video footage from Karen's secret office, showing meetings with unknown figures exchanging envelopes and discussing plans for expansion and silencing dissent. There were names, local officials, business owners, even some neighbors, people Mark had trusted. Karen's corruption ran deeper and wider than anyone suspected. Mark realized the battle had just taken a new, darker turn. The web of deceit extended beyond the HOA, threatening to engulf the entire town. He called Daniel and Lisa immediately. "We're not just fighting Karen anymore," Mark said grimly. "We're up against something bigger and more dangerous." As the three strategized late into the night, the stakes became clear. This wasn't just a fight for a boat or an HOA, it was a fight for the truth. And the truth, Mark knew, could change everything. Mark, Daniel, and Lisa gathered in Mark's living room, the USB footage playing on the large screen. The grainy videos revealed meetings between Karen and several prominent town officials, including the mayor's chief aide and a local real estate developer. Their hushed conversations centered on secret deals, property seizures, and strategies to silence anyone who dared oppose their plan to reshape the community and its waterfront for personal gain. "This goes far beyond the HOA," Lisa whispered, eyes wide. "We're dealing with a full-blown conspiracy." Mark's jaw clenched. "We need to get this to the state investigators and fast." Daniel nodded. "But we have to be careful. They're powerful and have eyes everywhere." The trio made contact with a trusted state official, handing over the damning evidence. Weeks of tense waiting followed as the investigation unfolded in secret. Meanwhile, Karen sat in jail, her influence crumbling but her spirit unbroken. She refused to talk, her silence a stubborn wall against justice. Mark tried to rebuild his life. He visited the marina daily, hoping for news about his boat, which was still held as evidence. Then, one morning, his phone buzzed with an unexpected call. "Mark, it's the police," a voice said. "We've located your boat, and there's something you need to see." At the marina, Mark followed the officers to a remote dock. His boat was there, but not alone. Tied beneath the hull, concealed beneath tarps, were several waterproof containers marked with official seals. "What's inside?" Mark asked, heart pounding. An officer opened one container, revealing stacks of documents. More proof of corruption and bribery that no one had expected to find hidden here. Then the officers pulled aside the tarp, revealing something else. Several high-tech surveillance devices and a stash of cash. Mark's eyes widened. "Karen was using my boat as a covert base?" The officer nodded grimly. "It appears she used it to coordinate illegal activities and intimidate residents." Mark felt a mix of relief and fury. Karen's reach had been deeper than he imagined, but now the evidence was undeniable. The state's investigation exploded into the public eye. Arrests followed, local officials, business people, and others entangled in the corruption ring. Karen, facing overwhelming evidence, finally broke her silence. In a stunning confession, she revealed the entire scheme and the lengths they went to maintain control. The community began to heal. New leaders took charge of the HOA, promising transparency and fairness. At the final town meeting, Mark stood before a crowd of hopeful faces. "This fight wasn't just about my boat," he said. "It was about standing up to abuse, fear, and corruption. Together we reclaimed our community." Just as applause broke out, a hand reached into Mark's pocket. His phone buzzed with a new message. "You won this battle, but the ocean has many waves. Be ready." Mark smiled, eyes narrowing with determination. The war might be over, for now, but the tides of change were just beginning.